Hey, what's up, everybody? Legend826 here. So, yeah, I saw the second episode of the fifth season of Riverdale, The Preppy Murders. Quite an interesting episode, a lot of interesting twists, honestly. I never would have expected the two shocking twists that occurred. Well, one shocking twist. The other twist is not really so shocking because we kind of already knew all that. But it is still a twist. So, anyways, this is after prom, and everyone's been celebrating and having a good time. You know, Archie and Veronica found out Veronica found about Archie and Betty kissing. So Archie and Veronica decided to keep their relationship. They have to pretend that everything is fine, nothing is going wrong. You know, that way Jughead doesn't find out about the whole thing. It's just like what happened in season 2. Archie told Veronica, but Betty didn't say anything until after Jughead found out. People are blaming Archie for what happened, and even though Archie is in the wrong, they have to remember that Betty also was involved. She went along with it. Yeah, she stopped it, but she still cheated on Jughead with Archie, so that can't be denied. And of course, with Veronica, in the last episode, Veronica was on Hermione's lap crying about what happened between her and Archie. Guess who was listening in? Hiram. Now, we all know Hiram is obnoxious, of course. He causes conflicts with other characters, he ruins businesses, gets involved with other people's lives, tries to take over stuff and buy stuff, and he always seems to have control over other people. However, if there's one thing that Hiram definitely won't stand for, it's anybody hurting his daughter. And even though Hiram has done terrible things to his own family members, he still cares about his daughter in a weird sort of way. So Archie's in the gym, and he's lifting weights, and all of a sudden, Hiram gets him in a chokehold. He doesn't strangle him or anything but he puts him in a chokehold. He grabs him, and then he starts criticizing Archie. He starts scolding him for cheating on Veronica with Betty. And Archie tells him to stay away from him, and then Hiram. If Hiram confronting Archie, I don't have a problem with, because Archie was in the wrong and he needs to be corrected. Constructive criticism is necessary for a person's character development. However, I don't agree with him what he did. He mentioned Fred. He said the apple doesn't far fall from the tree. That means he was talking about Fred, because Fred was hooked up with Hermione when Hiram was in prison back in season 1, and Archie of course flies into a rage because of course Archie of course misses his father, and he of course wishes that Fred was still there. But Luke Perry, I think it's kind of insensitive, because Luke Perry died in real life, because because Fred didn't just die on the show. Luke Perry died in real life as well. That's the only reason why Fred died in the first place. It may not be a big deal, honestly. Maybe mentioning Fred wasn't really a big deal to some people, but I still think that part wasn't necessary. Hiram didn't have to bring Fred up like that. You want to insult Archie, go ahead, but leave Fred out of it, honestly. But then Archie charges towards Hiram, and then Tom Keller breaks in and stops it from turning into a brawl. So Archie tells Hiram to get out of the gym. At the same time, Mary told Archie about Jeffrey Augustine, George Augustine, because his trial was coming up, and they were asking him if Archie wanted to make a leniency plea, if they were willing to forgive George Augustine, because George Augustine didn't kill Fred. Jeffrey did, even though it was an accident, and George, of course, took the blame for his son, as we all saw in the episode. George took the blame for his son, so that his son wouldn't go to jail. So Archie thinks long and hard about writing a letter, about forgiveness and all. But it takes him some time. But he needs to think about it. And meanwhile, Betty and Jughead. Betty gets a call from Brett saying that he says he has essential information that needs to get out of that prison. Because of some things things are going unusual in there. Betty, of course, doesn't know what to think about this, because after all, Brett has done horrible things to her and Jughead, so of course that's going to make her feel suspicious, and Jughead probably feels the same way. And meanwhile, at the same time, let me think. Yeah, Veronica. Now, we all know Hiram has been getting involved in fights, trying to protect his daughter or whatever, or at least trying to have some more, take control of more businesses and everything, getting involved in more brawls and fights and arguments, and Veronica has to clean up his wounds. Well, Veronica's walking outside of Pop's, and all of a sudden, some of the family members of Hiram's that were that were family members of the people that Hiram attacked confront Veronica, and they would have killed her, but then Hermosa shot all 3 of them with their gun. So Hermosa ends up saving her life there. So they both decide to confront Hiram about this, tell him to quit his business, but then Hiram tells them to get out of his office, because it's not that simple. He's not going to just simply back down from power just like that, obviously. This is Hiram we're talking about. This man is relentless. We also have, let me think. Yeah, the tapes. So Jughead tries to find out who was behind all the tapes. You know, they still don't know who's been selling them and distributing them. You know, they still don't have a clue who's behind all of it. Yeah, that's one of the twists that we find out later at the end of the episode. But, you know, and meanwhile, Cheryl and Tony are still trying to get the relationship working together. Cheryl has some business deals to make, so she tries contacting the other members of the Blossom household, but they all refuse to help be associated with Cheryl's plan. So then Cheryl asks Penelope to help, and Penelope ends up poisoning all of them. Of course, typical. Penelope has poisoned people before, she'll do it again, even if it is her own flesh and blood. Who am I kidding? She poisoned Clifford and Claudia, so... Yeah, so she poisoned all the members of the Blossom household, you know. But I mean, you know, it had to be done, you know. There were none of the Blossom family members are really a big loss, except for Cheryl, honestly. So yeah, that was pretty shocking. And, yeah, let me see, Oh, yeah. So Jughead and Betty try talking to Charles about what had just happened. All of a sudden, they get a new tape. And the tape shows someone walking into the Jones household, the Jones/Cooper house, and they end up going to Jellybean, and they end up, like, putting a knife to her face. And then Alice says they have to get out of the house immediately. So they all leave, and they head for a hotel to stay at temporarily. But then Betty and Jughead decide to put pieces together about who could have been behind all of this. Betty says if they were in the house, if they had been in the house, they probably weren't there before, you know, multiple times. And then Jughead figures out that they were bugging some of the phones, and they figure out who it is. Charles. Yes, Charles is the one who's been, well, no, Charles hasn't been making videotapes, but he has been, like, he was the one responsible for, yeah, speaking of what happened, like, Brett was actually killed in prison. They found out that someone, like, stabbed Brett, gouged his eyes out when he was in the jail. And then Betty got a call from Donna saying that someone had killed Joan with a rock, and Donna was worried that she'd be next, because after all, if Brett and Joan were dead, Donna would definitely be next on the hit list for sure. But Charles was the one who killed Joan. Chick ended up killing Brett because Chick and Charles were connected, and Chick was in prison, so Chick could have easily got hold of Brett and taken care of him right then and there. So yeah, that was pretty interesting, honestly, and so yeah, that's taken care of, and so we find out that Brett was the one who so Charles and Chick were involved. Chick killed Brett, and Charles killed Joan. You know, Charles, grabbed a rock and hit her over the head with it, just like Joan tried to hit Jughead with that rock, but failed to kill him, you know, because of Jughead's beanie. So anyways, you know, so Charles killed Joan, and Donna escaped, so that means we might be seeing her again sometime in the future, maybe not, hopefully not. Anyways, so Charles admits to all this, but he says that he wasn't the one distributing the videotapes, you know, and then Betty tells Charles that he will go to prison for the rest of his life, and he will confess to all the crimes he committed. And then Betty and Jughead find out the surprising twist that the person who's been spreading the videotapes all this time was Jellybean. Jellybean was the one who was distributing the videotapes, and it was Jellybean. Yeah, she was the one who was making tapes, you know, of everyone in town. The reason why she was doing all this is because she was missing her brother. You know, Jughead had gone off to Stonewall Prep when they had reunited, and all of a sudden he was going off to college. So of course Jellybean wanted to keep him in town for a mystery. That's the reason why, you know, Jellybean did all of that. Drastic actions, sure, but she did it because he really wanted her brother around. So then FP embraces Jellybean and says everything will be okay, even though what Jellybean did was still seriously messed up. Like sending all those videotapes, especially the one with Fred Andrews getting shot. That's completely too far, you know. And speaking of the videotape, Archie watched it and he was pretty angry about that, I'd say. And then after Mary watched it herself, Archie grabs the tape and ends up destroying it. But then he smashes the television. I understand getting rid of the tape. Like, obviously, you don't want to see that filth ever again. But destroying the television, I mean, that costs a bunch of money. I mean, that's going too far. Smashing it with the baseball bat. I understand that Archie's angry because of what happened to his father, and he has every right to be. I don't blame him for being upset. But, I mean, destroying your own personal property costs a lot of money. That's too much, honestly. And then Frank Andrews comes over, Frank, Archie's uncle, played by Ryan Robbins. And Ryan Robbins and Luke Perry worked together on Goodnight for Justice, Queen of Hearts, which is a 2013 Hallmark film. And they also worked together on one episode of the TV series Jeremiah, in which Luke Perry had the lead role for the short run. Only lasted 2 seasons, but Luke Perry and Ryan Robbins worked together on one episode of Jeremiah. So that was pretty interesting to see, Frank Andrews return. And Archie ends up punching Frank to express his anger. But then Archie and Frank hug it out. Then Frank tells Archie he'll turn himself in for what happened with when he did as a mercenary, he'll turn himself in, And then Archie decides to write a letter for telling the judge to forgive Jeffrey Augustine, because Jeffrey turned himself in, to save his father from going through all that. Archie tells the judge to forgive Jeffrey because Fred would not want his life to be ruined. Fred was all about forgiveness and mercy, because Fred was a great person. Luke Perry was an even greater person in real life. Obviously he didn't deserve what happened to him. So obviously it's good to see that Archie's using what Fred believed in, using it for his own actions and helping it to help other people. So I can definitely see the mentality behind all that. So as all that's taking place, let me see. We took care of Betty, Jughead, all that's been taken care of. Okay, Archie, yeah. Veronica then confronts Hiram and tells him that he has to retire for good, because after all they've been through, they get Hermione involved as well, because after Hiram got beaten up, Veronica refused to clean his wounds, and then Hiram decides to finally give up and decides to retire and put it to rest, and Hermione finally, after all this time, decides to divorce Hiram. Thank the heavens. Hiram and Hermione are finally divorcing. Did anyone ship them at all? Let me know if anybody actually shipped Hermione and Hiram. I want to know who actually shipped those two together. But yeah, so that's pretty much the episode. It was a good episode in my opinion. 2 shocking twists with Charles, and I was hoping Charles would be a good guy, but after he bugged Betty and Jughead's phones, that ship kind of tanked. Yeah, so that's pretty much all of that, honestly. Pretty good episode in my opinion, pretty interesting, honestly, and looking forward to seeing what the 3rd episode of Riverdale has to bring. But yeah, those are my thoughts about Riverdale, Season 5, Episode 2, The Preppy Murders. But yeah, that's all I gotta say. And I'll see you all later. Legend 826, out.